And now, Noble Silence has asked some of the Miami Sangha members to do a little Dharma sharing, brief Dharma sharing. And we'll begin with Eileen, who will speak on the Four Noble Truths.
Hi, I'm Eileen. The import of the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are the cream of the Buddha teaching. The Buddha continued to proclaim this truth right up until his great passing away, Mahaparinibbana. The first noble truth is suffering, dukkha. We all suffer to some extent. We have some maladies in our body and our mind. We must recognize and acknowledge the presence of this suffering and touch it. To do so, we may need the help of a teacher and a sangha, friends in the practice. The second noble truth is the origin, root, nature, creation, or arising, samudaya, of suffering. After we touch our suffering, we need to look deeply into it to see how it came to be. We need to recognize and identify the spiritual and material foods we have ingested that are causing us to suffer. The third noble truth is the cessation, nirodha, of creating suffering by refraining from doing the things that make us suffer. The Buddha did not deny the existence of suffering, but also did not deny the existence of joy and happiness. The Buddha taught us how to recognize and acknowledge the presence of suffering, but he also taught the cessation of suffering. If there were no possibility of cessation of suffering, what is the use of the practice? The third noble truth is that its healing is possible. The fourth noble truth is the path, marga, that leads to refraining from doing the things that cause us to suffer. This is the path we need the most. The Buddha called it the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration. In my personal experience, as I am a person who is sick both mentally and physically, the teaching regarding the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path has helped me to recognize and accept my illness, understanding that the more suffering I allow, the more prone I become to experience relapses. No longer do I suffer due to my limitation. I have come to terms, and by doing this, there has been an improvement in both my physical and mental state. Continuing the practice from the lesson I have received from my teacher, the help of meditation and additional techniques on how to calm my mind and my body, it has led me to stop taking the antipsychotic and sleeping pills. Practicing vigilant attention in all daily activities makes my concentration easier. This has been of great benefit for my discipline. This teaching has been for me a valuable jewel since I felt lost and without exit. Today, 2 years after first receiving the teachings of the Buddha, I have become aware that healing is possible, and I see the change of occurrence day by day, not only in my health, but also in my relation with my relatives.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
Next up, I believe we have Carlos, who will speak on emptiness. Carlos, turn on your microphone on. Sorry, I forgot to remind you.
Good, thank you. Well, good morning, it's Carlos from Miami. I was asked by our master to speak something about how Buddhism has influenced our lives, my life and my wife's life. And well, in a lot of ways. But to be sure, I'll be sure, promise, don't panic. I wrote down a small paragraph to be concise and direct as much as possible. And I'm gonna give you a personal story, a short one, I promised. That it's a good example of how Buddhism has changed my life, our lives in this case. A few weeks ago, in a conversation with a prominent oncologist physician, who is also my brother, told me that the battle against this coronavirus is a very difficult one because we are fighting against the mother nature. After that, he started to cite and almost recite a long speech in a medical jargon, plagued with technicalities, scientific terms that I could not understand a word, not a single one. However, for his surprise, I was able to understand him, to understand the core of his conversation and ultimately his fundamental statement. We are fighting against the mother nature. He asked me, how you could understand me when you're not able to retain even the simple name of a common cold remedy? And my answer was immediate and very spontaneous, because I'm studying the Dharma of the Buddha. And now I see the world totally different from the way I used to see it before studying it. Now, I know, among other things, the emptiness, sightlessness, and aimlessness, which are known in Buddhism as the three doors of liberation. I cannot explain how my brother's eyes opened so widely, but he replied me with an intelligent request. Could you tell me more about the Buddha? What the heck is that emptiness you're talking about? Empty of what, my dear brother? When in fact we are full of fluids and millions of other things, and continue with another long speech. Well, my brother, we are empty of separate, independent self. We cannot be by ourselves alone. We can only interbe with everything else in the universe. With the practice of Buddhism, of course, we nourish the inside of emptiness in everything we contact through the whole day. We see the nature of emptiness in everything we are in contact with, whether that contact is direct or indirect to our limited senses. We see the emptiness. We see the sun in a flower. We see the earth, the water that nourished it, the different particles that form the atoms and molecules that ultimately give us the image of a flower, give us its smell, its color, and everything else related to a flower. We also see those particles, atoms, molecules, water, earth, and so on, also form our bodies. They have the same composition and nature of our bodies. We can easily say that we are in the flower and the flower is in us. The famous Hermetic statement of the all-in-one and the one in all was experienced and lived by the Buddha, and has been transmitted since then by the turning of the wheel of Dharma. The coronavirus is part of the nature. It is a formation that contains genetic material based in ribonucleic acid, technical jargon, excuse me, about 30,000 nucleoids with positive polarity. Yes, polarity. And that, as soon as penetrate our cells, make proteins necessary to complete the multiplication cycles. We are also a formation made up of proteins and ribonucleic acid, among many other components. our muscles are made of proteins. It's an example. So the virus is in us, and we are in the virus. And that is precisely why it's so difficult to fight against it. In some extent, we are fighting against ourselves. And this seems to be a very difficult battle. The best thing we can do for now is to avoid getting direct physical contact with the virus, because it's simply we're moving into a new house, which is our organism, where it will find all necessary components that it already has within to make itself comfortable and rapidly begin to produce a replica of itself. That Dharma teaching helped me understand the complex medical explanation of my brother. It was very clear to me why doctors and scientists are fighting against Mother Nature. This is one of many other examples that illustrates how the Buddhism has influenced my life and changed my cosmovision of the vision of life. I could extend, for hours, but I promise to be short and concise. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. And now, Noble Silence would like to share a few words.
Okay, yes. My speech is very brief, very short. In the previous meeting, our sister Sandra, I think so was Sandra, gave us a wonderful Dharma talk about impermanence and shared a wonderful story with her friend. I wanted to, if you allow me, adding something more to this wonderful concept and law of the nature, that is impermanence. Almost always when we speak of impermanence, we refer to the death, which is the most significant change. But I think that impermanence is more than. It's life. Because without impermanence, there is no life. We should not always see impermanence from the point of view of death, which is the most dramatic change that we can see and the one that the most marks us. Without impermanence, that is, could it be oxygen, plant, flower, season, water, etc. Nothing exists without impermanence. Our children, our grandchildren will not become good men and women. And why not? When our body is no longer serving us for old age or sickness, they then go back to the nature. So I repeat again, impermanent law is equal to life. Impermanence does not cause us suffering. What causes us suffering is not accepting this wonderful universal law.
Thank you, Noble Silence. Noble Silence also asked me to say a few words. I will speak a little bit of what I've been speaking to the English-speaking Miami Sangha over the past several weeks. We know that we are in difficult, unusual, unprecedented times. And so that's been, a lot of that topic, which includes, you can see how so much of the teachings help us understand and and look deeply into our situation, including what Noble Silence just shared in reference to impermanence, and Sandra last week in reference to impermanence, and what Carlos just shared about emptiness, which we have been actually talking about in the English-speaking Sangha as well. I will say, I will add on to that some of the tools that we get that have been given to us, have been passed down through, for 2,600 years, in becoming skillful at this thing we call life, and in teaching us to look deeply. So I heard a lot of people have been saying how tired they have been feeling through this time, how staying home has exhausted them, and and there's been especially in the artist community, which actually a big part of my sangha, I would say 98%, I wouldn't say 100% are artists. Is it a time for productivity, or is it, should we now get busy now that we have the time at home, or is it a time to really stop and heal? And I have to, and that's really an individual choice. I have to feel, I have to side with my nature, and that is actually to slow down and heal, not necessarily to get really busy and productive, because this is unusual and unprecedented for us. And I believe that one of the reasons why we are so exhausted, with the, not to mention how we're being bombarded, we have to really be careful. In one of the wonderful precepts in no intoxication of the body, it says, be careful with what you visually, which includes CNN and your daily news. It's really important to stay informed, but we also know our body tells us when we've had enough. As when we eat, we should eat. It's important to eat, but we should also be mindful in our consumption and not overeat. So when we start feeling this anxiety, which is only a natural reaction to what's going on, our body goes into the fight or flight, right? Which is millions of years old. It's how our ancestors have survived. However, in the time of our ancestors, it was an immediate threat, the tiger in the bush, and your body went into fight, flight, or freeze, and it went into that mode long enough to deal with the situation, enough to run or to kill the tiger, in order for it to survive, for your survival. Lasted whatever, 5, 7, 10 minutes. And it feels like, especially through the constant consumption of the media and the news, that we are under constant bombardment and constant fight or flight, which is really exhausting. And yes, helps us to survive. What happens in fight or flight? Our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate speeds up, our lungs, we breathe shallower and faster. So that staying in that for 5 to 7 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is it takes to survive, is a good thing. But remaining in that all day long is counterproductive to our health, right? Our blood pressure being high for too long, our breath being shallow for too long, and of course this immediate threat that's constant, right? Because if we have to go to the post office or to the supermarket, it's a threat. And being in that state really costs us. The good news is that the tools that have been passed down to us, breathing and meditation, the deep breathing And I'm sorry, I'll go back for a second. The fight or flight is the sympathetic nervous system that's kicking in. When we sit and we breathe on our cushion, we immediately, automatically engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. So just by the simple act of sitting on the cushion, paying attention to our breath, we can help transform, we can help switch the systems from sympathetic nervous system, from the fight or flight, which is what I was thinking in my fight or flight, we can transform that just by sitting and deep breathing into the rest and digest. And these are part of our teachings that have been transmitted down to us and passed down to us for 2,600 years. Not quite as old as the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, which are millions of years old. So that is actually how the teachings have helped me get through these difficult times, and have helped me, and the looking deeply, of course, right? The looking deeply has helped me get through these times, looking at how my body's responding, look at what more than 10 minutes of news or 5 minutes of news, I really have to take it by small bits. What that does to my body. And immediately, I can feel when my heart's beating. I can feel the anxiety being watered, the seed of anxiety being watered. And I know that's when I need to sit and water my seeds of calm and gratitude and love and compassion as we continue to work our way through this.